Our first talk today is Dr. Thomas Lecocq. He is a seismologist and work leader at the Royal Observatory of Belgium. He recently published a very interesting paper in Science that I suggest everybody read, and he will discuss this paper today. The title of Thomas's talk is Global Quietening of Anthropogenic High-Frequency Seismic Noise Due to COVID-19 Pandemic Lockdown Measures. Thank you for being here, Thomas.
Thanks, Angela. Thank you for the organizing of all this conference in the virtual world. It's not an easy task, I believe. Thanks for having me, for opening the conference. It's a big honor for me. I'm not per se a data scientist. I'm a geologist by training and gained seismological knowledge by doing a PhD in that field. But then, yeah. So this is about data. This is about sharing. This is about open code and knowledge that we want to share. So you see that I already reduced the size of the title. So I just changed it to the 2020 quieting, when humans stop generating seismic noise, which is not exactly true, but it is a summary and a kind of take-home message of what we have seen in the last few months. So if we look at the timeline of the COVID-19, we know the first outbreak was made public on the 31st of December 2019 in China, and then the virus moved with humans, of course, and the first case declared in Italy was in 31st of January, first casualty 22nd February, and then the spread went all over Europe. And for example, in Belgium, we have the first case that is officially COVID-19 related in early February, and the first casualty on 11 March. And then, of course, the global spread that we all know and we all live to get today. So the start date of this all official thing was on the 11th of March, when the Director General of the World Health Organization stated that we have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic, and he moved further in saying that this is not just a public health crisis, and that every sector, every country, every individual must take measures so that we can save life and minimize impact. And he said this very clearly: we need 4 key areas where we can act. We can prepare and be ready, detect, protect, and treat, reduce transmission, innovate, and learn. And one part that I'm going to talk most about is the reduced transmission, because this is what we have seen with seismic data. So if we look at the lockdown measures that were imposed by governments, and this is a fantastic work done by the Oxford team, and they have this fantastic tracker of the stringency index. So they build that with using data that they gather for all countries in the world, and depending of if your government has imposed, for example, specific rules for going to shopping, if you were asked to wear a mask or stay home or whatever, then this index would go towards 100%. And we can see that the virus actually spreads like a wave through the world, and this is where our seismological words can come in front. So these lockdown measures were enforced, and for example, in Belgium on the 15th and 18th of March. And so this is what we have seen, and this is where in some places we still see today, because the virus, of course, is still there. So the streets were literally empty. Public transport in some places was maintained or reduced sometimes. Telework was encouraged, and then we all discovered who the essential workers are. So what happens when the humans stop? Well, we do have a strong impact on the environment at all scales, between spatial and temporal scales, from very local to global effects, from this very instant of putting a footstep next to a seismic station to centuries on climate changes, for example. So whenever we act, there is a signature in the environment that we can really search for and analyze as scientists. So seismologists usually don't like noise. Well, it was true in the past. When we want to put a seismic station somewhere, we're trying to put it far away from humans, because we knew since probably 150 years that close to humans, there is a lot of noise. Just the vibrations generated by people, their behavior on the cars, the industry, all these elements that human build is generating seismic noise, because it's generating seismic waves in the ground. You can feel when a big lorry truck passes in your street, but it's exactly what we don't want to have on a seismic network. And this noise is everywhere. We have these continuous vibrations recorded by seismometers, and those vibrations, we measure them from different origins. We have the oceanic noise linked to the dynamic of the ocean, the winds, the atmosphere, the waves, all those things coupled with the hard rock, with the hard solid earth, and the waves transmit in the ground, and we can measure that everywhere in the world. And humans are culprit for the high frequency noise, and I'm going to come back to that in the next slide. But there's also a complete new field since probably the early 2000s, 2005, that brings the seismic noise à la mode. We want to use seismic noise because we can extract information from this coherent wave field that we record for different stations, for example. So what happens, how are we sure that the seismic noise is generated by humans at high frequency, let's say? Well, this is a plot of a 2.5 months time of high frequency seismic noise. This is the unit is displacement, to give you an idea of the fineness of this information. We go from 0 to 100 nanometer, and you can clearly see the weekends. So you see the week times and then the weekends, and the daytime and the night times are very different. And humans are the only thing on this planet who have such a regularity on a weekly basis. The weather doesn't change like that. The oceans don't change like that. Wind doesn't change like that. It's only humans. And you can even see that the New Year Eve, the evening parties are much more noisier in terms of seismic noise than any other night of the year. So we know that, and if we look even at, so this is a 24-hour clock plot, so from 0 hour to 24 hours, and the different colors represent different days, and these are statistics over this period of time. And you can see that these two, the blue and the brown colors, are actually the early Saturday morning and the early Sunday morning. And you see that there is more seismic noise between 1 and 3.5 in the morning on Saturday and Sunday morning. Well, actually that's Friday night and Saturday night. So we are sure we are generating this noise. So we knew it. We knew it is something we can record. So whenever everything paced down here in Brussels, we knew it was coming. And so we were all teleworking from the Observatory of Belgium, and it's for us, as for me, for example, was the first time I was home, and I wanted to share something about our work, what we observe, and also what we want to share with people. So we wrote this, the staff is teleworking and the earth continues shaking, and then showing this graph of the energy in the orange band here going down from after the first lockdown measures here in black or in red. Of course, we didn't stop there because we put that on Twitter and it went kind of viral without any back joke when it was relayed by Gizmodo. And as soon as that triggered a lot of attention, we got interviews from all over the world, and we tried to separate with people who are actually applying the same kind of technique and same ideas to their data. So we directly open sourced the code that we use to process this data, and this is on the right side of your screen. You see a seismic station map of the world with seismic stations that are, most of them, accessible for free and online and in real time or near real time, that anyone can access and process. So sharing the code triggered some interest, for example, from a secondary school teacher in the UK, or from a seismologist colleague in Switzerland, who adapted the code so that it could use citizen seismometers called Raspberry Shakes, and these are projects that you can buy a seismometer for your home or for your school for $1,000. And so all this code was open and available to people, and what it triggered, again, a lot of attention on Twitter, and a lot of colleagues told me, okay, I'm processing the code with your STEM, with your code, what do you think about the results, and so on. And so this is what I wrote on the 1st of April. Very bad day for people believing in April's fool's jokes. But I wrote that as, what if, guys, friends, colleagues, people I don't know, why don't we join forces to write this paper? To write a paper about social seismology. We are witnessing something unique. We are home and we are all working on our data. I don't want to download your data and process it for you. You can do it because the code is open. So why don't we join forces? And so we did. And we processed more than 300 seismic stations in the world, among which 268 stations had really good data. But we could have processed 10,000, but it was enough to be representative of what we were seeing. And here in red, you see seismic stations where we have a truth signal, a clear signal of a lockdown measures affecting seismic noise. So there's a reduction of the seismic noise due to lockdowns. And in blue is where you don't. The size of the scatters is inverse to the population density. So it enhances somehow, if you want, places where there is few people living. For example, here we have lockdown effects visible on the seismic data, while there is a very few people living. And so if we look at the time dependence of this time series, well, we see that this image, each line of the image corresponds to the seismic noise levels for one city. You see on the left and on the right, you have the names of the cities. You go from Taiwan to China, and then you have, of course, you go to Italy, and then Boston, you go to Stuttgart, Denver, Toronto, San Francisco, and then you go up to Tokyo at the end. And what you see, the little white bubbles here, and if you follow my mouse, are the dates that we found in the registries of the first measure enforced by governments, by local or national governments for reducing the spread of the virus. You can also see the Christmas New Year period. It's also quiet, and you see that all over the world, this wave of measures actually triggered a wave of noise diminution. And if we take a big average of all that, a big median, this is what we look at, and this is the white trace. The white trace is the noise level aligned for local times between seismic stations all over the world, aggregated into a big median, a simple median, and you have the nights and the Sunday nights, and then the weeks, and then the Sunday nights again in dashed gray. That's Sundays. You have the Christmas and the New Year Eve. They are usually quieter, and that's observed all over the world. And then you see that this big drop starts somewhere in February and then goes to a minimum somewhere in April, May. What you also see on this graph is the data that we gathered from Apple and Google and other mobility information that you can get. So this is smartphone location, aggregated, privacy, whatever you want. And what you see is that the only category that goes up is the residential category. Of course, people stayed home more, but all the other categories like taking transports, going to retail and recreation, or going to workplaces dropped. So we have a link between seismic data and behavior of people, or statistics that you can get out of mobility information. And this is wanted to do this proof of concept. Of course, there's a lot of work to try to decipher the different contributions of all these to the big mix of seismic noise. So in the end, we managed to make this publication here that Angela introduced, with 76 authors from 25 countries, processing 6 months of data from 337 stations. That's roughly 541 billion samples. So seismic stations usually sample at 100 hertz. And so distributing the code and having all these colleagues processing their own station in the end allowed us just to gather the final files, the curves per station, and then to make some interesting statistics on that and make the plots. And because it's a data science conference, I also wanted to show that we used some, of course, the whole code was in Python and open and free. We used the free account of Slack to coordinate this with 100 people, and among which the 76 authors. We wrote that paper in Overleaf, and we did the reviews interactively with 76 people reviewing the paper at the same time in Google Docs. That was a big thing, and we were very proud when Donol and Nissemaya did this editorial, this column in Science, and said that this paper exemplifies what should be a thought of a best practice for scientific research. Was very exactly what we wanted to achieve. Exactly what we want to show, that we can do that all together. So what else has been done or is in progress? Well, there's a lot of studies going on with specific regions, like focus regions. There's a few papers on Italy and China. There's one on the USA. There's one in Japan, one in Brazil. So looking at these influences that you can, for example, see here with this fantastic picture from Science, from the same paper of Donol and Nissemaya. And you have this all these things that influence the seismometer. So these things here are linked to humans. You have here, for example, wildlife also. But what we seismometers want is that we need to understand what these sources are and what these vibrations, pollutions are, because we want to study hurricanes, natural hazards, seismic events, earthquakes, volcanoes, all these things that we are actually putting our seismometers for. We want to understand the influence of humans. There's also new methods arising and things that will be of very big interest for your community of data, because that's a huge data set. That's dark fibers. So it's reusing optical fibers that are not used, so they are dark, and you use them as seismometers. And with that, if you are along a boulevard, for example, there's an example in Stanford already, there's another one somewhere in the eastern US, you can use that to actually monitor cars and pedestrians and everything that's just on the street, because you can record every centimeter of this dark fiber is a virtual seismometer, and you can really extract information from there. We are linking with different disciplines today. We are linking with sound pollution, so what you can hear, because we knew, and if you live in a city, you probably heard that the noise that you hear was also much quieter during that period of time. The air pollution was lower. We have links with social people who want to know if we can really link to social behavior of people in terms of like social distancing, and if there is a signature for that. So there's a lot to do. This was the first step. There was a step that was really useful for us also to keep busy. I think it was an important thing. So I thank you for the attention. I want to just finally close my talk with this this quote from the paper, that we dedicate our work to all the people who have kept the countries going during the difficult times. Thank you. You're muted, Angela. You're muted.
I am muted. Okay, thank you so much for speaking. I had a question about the wonderful image that you show of noise as a function of time. Are you guys going to keep updating that so that we can see what's going on across the country or across the world?
Yeah, we are trying now, because it took a big effort in the end to make that publication. So we do have indeed now a script that just gathers all the data at the same place, so not requiring everyone to have time to do that. We will provide soon an update on that. The picture is much more tricky than the first one, because the wave was really sharp in the first part, and then countries went out of lockdown, some stayed in there, and now we have like a ping pong effect everywhere, and then you see trends that would probably be more interesting to look at the scale of a continent like the whole US, North America, or like Europe, and you see that for example, when Italians or when French or when German take a decision, then you have a wave of decisions that go around. That's more like geopolitics than real various fighting.
Can you use this data to make recommendations for air pollution and other similar things?
So there was this idea of comparing so there's been 2 publications already on the air pollution visible by satellites. There is, if I remember well, there is a big discrepancy between NOx pollution, so nitrogen oxides, and dust or fine pollution. And because the industry kept going, but not the personal cars, so you have this difference. I think we could. The thing is, the seismometer is a very, very precise instrument in terms of time, but in terms of spatial dependency, spatial aggregation is quite vast. So around your seismic station, there's, for example, on the video behind me, on a fake wall behind me, you see this shack. This building is hosting the seismometer of the Observatory of Belgium. And during in April, the noise went completely wild. It went super high, and I was angry at people. I said, "No, you have to stay home. Come on, let's keep home." But in the end, it was just one single cradle Beko next to the station that was actually destroying a house. And so you cannot state anything about the people around them or the station anymore, because your noise, I mean, it's like as if someone is screaming next to you, you cannot hear the rest of the room, right? Exactly the same way, the seismometer is sensitive to something very local also. So we could, but it requires really identifying very fine information about the mixture that we are looking at.
I noted that one of the interesting things about the figure was, like, for example, Hong Kong never got quiet. Did you guys have any other interesting observations that you noted?
Yeah, well, actually, there's one of the two stations in Hong Kong went quiet because one is hosted in school, and the school was closed.
Oh.
So there's a lot of information there. Yeah, there's very, very extreme information. For example, one seismometer at school is placed in Nepal, in Kathmandu. That one went below zero. I mean, we go down to electrical noise of the instrument because there is nothing around. And some other places kept busy. For example, we want to state that it was quieter than any Christmas period. But then Christmas at Zugspitze or Mammoth Mountain, two ski resorts, is busy. So you cannot compare to that. So you need to find a good point of comparison. And so our point of comparison or normalization that we used is from Sunday night to usually Monday midday. That would be your 0 and 100% of energy.
The size of the data, how hard is it for you to keep? Because I remember I think you showed about 180 at 7 sites, but I think there's actually was over 300.
Yeah.
Is it hard to keep all this data?
No, well, actually, we seismologists for 100 years, we are sharing data openly. Since the internet arrived, we continued doing that. So there is a lot of very, very high quality and actually state-of-the-art data sharing procedures and tools, web services that we can use. So you have, in the US, you have the IRIS UNAFCO that is responsible for archiving and grouping data. We do have that in Europe too. But the thing is, in this very case, everyone kept his own data. We didn't have to share the raw data. We just shared simple data frames that were actually the process data, and each of them was probably 40 kilobytes. So that was easy. If you want to redo it on your own, on your side, you better be close to the data center, of course, because that's terabytes of data.
I got a question about, are these data sets public?
Yeah, I think 95% of what we used is public, and actually they are all public and accessible for 95%. So all of them are public, but some are, for IT reasons, not accessible on these web services, but all the others are. So you have very nice tools I showed in the presentation. The slides will be shared after the talk, and I will put all the links to the codes that we can use, and you can reproduce exactly what we did. And actually the paper goes with a GitHub repository that contains and the RMS files, so these noise files, and the Jupyter notebooks for plotting.
Last question before we have to move on. I was curious, have you been in contact with any policymakers? Because it really stands out that this is just an unbiased metric for what is actually going on, in these areas.
No, not directly. I know 2 cases where the policymakers talked about it, said, yeah, there seemed to be something from the geoscience guys while trying to convince people to stay home. We haven't been approached by them. I think also because we were very careful of what we're saying. Actually, what I just told you about this house being destroyed next to the station. So I think we were maybe a bit careful, but it was reasonable to be. I mean, we don't want to show that we have the solution to monitor things.
I got one more question. I think we have another minute. Animal movement is sometimes linked with the events such as earthquakes. I think, is this methodology developed in any way that is helpful to detecting that and identifying noise?
No. The fact is, animals feeling earthquakes is a big debate, and you have a very nice person in the US trying to decipher that for 20 years, I think, Susan Huff. But no, animals feeling earthquakes is usually because they are quieter and more sensitive than we are. And definitely during this COVID-19 period, when we were home, we felt things better. I heard birds better. We feel the earth better. We measure the earth better with seismometers. This is true. And so maybe what we have experienced, so not the technology that we're using, but the quietness that we have known will help us understand what is this mixture that we are listening to and define probably maybe better filters or maybe ask us to move our seismic stations away from cities because it's impossible to use to monitor local earthquakes, for example.
I really like this question, so I'm going to give you an extra minute. Do you see any potential privacy issues? Could somebody use these, techniques to maybe learn information they shouldn't have easily?
Yeah, this is one of the things. Reason why also we stress that we have a big integrator. We don't look at specific places. Even when we used seismometers at home, so like these Raspberry Shakes, so those are in people's apartments. And so you would expect that because people telework and the kids are home, that the noise would go up. In the end, it wasn't the case. So first, the Raspberry Shakes, we never know the exact location because the coordinates are blurred, so they are like rounded to certain digits, but they are, and then some randomness added, so they don't have an exact position of the seismic station. So you know it's in London, but you don't really know at 500 meters plus minus where it is. But of course, if you know a seismic station is at someone's place, then you can know if that person is home or not. So there's potentially issues, and certainly in countries where we don't have the same, let's say, freedom that we have here, for example, in my country, this might be a tool for monitoring people, but then it requires also to know exactly what sensor is where, and this is not easy to do.
Thank you so much for that, and thank you for calling in from Belgium.
My pleasure, and I wish everyone a very good conference. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you for being here.